Seán Kelly, many people in the UK, or at least the UK press, are seeing Northern Ireland and the Irish border as being the key issue which there's been no real progress on and is going to prove the real sticking point of the whole Brexit negotiations. Do you see that as a fair comment at the moment?
Absolutely. And I've just come out of the plenary where the Brexit was debated again, and it's quite clear that the border situation in Ireland is a sticking point, as you said. It's not just for the United Kingdom, it's for the entire European Union as well as Ireland. And President Juncker made that point in his speech this morning. He said it's not an Irish issue, it's an EU issue. Many of the British MEPs didn't like that comment, but I think it shows clearly the point you've made in your question, that the border in Ireland is a sticking point, but the resolution has to be very clear so that the Good Friday Agreement is preserved in all its parts and that we don't return to a hard border.
In terms of this, who's negotiating with who over the Irish border, naturally some people might see this as, why don't the UK and Ireland, both of the parties who really are the only people involved in this issue, independently work out a solution which the EU can then listen to and adopt as part of the EU 27 negotiations, rather than having to do it through the EU and all the sort of infrastructure and people that involves as well. Do you not see it perhaps as it would be a lot clearer and smoother if it was a two-party negotiation rather than a 27 versus 1 negotiation?
It would be clearer and easier. I think the United Kingdom and Ireland would be able to discuss matters, but it's not entirely a EU-Ireland or United Kingdom-Ireland issue, because once the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, then the border becomes the border between the EU and a third country. So what I think will happen and should happen is that maybe informal discussions take place between Ireland and the United Kingdom, and that then when it would come to the discussions with the EU, they would have some idea of where an agreement can be got, if an agreement can be got. At the moment there are 3 suggestions. One of those 3 is going to have to operate at the end of the day.
Now, interestingly, in terms of the hard border, or rather the border between a third country and the EU, one of the suggestions put forward with regards to a smart border system was that there could be some kind of pre-registration for people who are moving across the border, and technology would help to ensure that there's pretty much a frictionless border going on there between the Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now, Leo Varadkar, the Taoiseach, has obviously said that is not an option. He's not prepared to consider that. And for some, that would be an indication that Leo Varadkar is not perhaps being as open-minded and creative in terms of the solutions as perhaps is necessary. What would you say to that?
I think Leo Varadkar is being sensible and practical in his approach, because pre-registration is a very small issue compared to the wider issue of the border itself. It's an open border, 300 crossing points, people and animals move up and down every day, so pre-registration in relation to goods would only be a part of it. So I think the point to be made is, at the moment there's a seamless, frictionless, open border, and we want nothing to change in that regard, and that was mentioned again in the Chamber this morning.
Now, a concern which perhaps is coming out of the fact that there's been little progression over the Irish border, as you said, in the past few months in regards to the Brexit negotiations, is that perhaps the EU is not being able to work out, or is not rather being able to negotiate with the UK to move anything forward in terms of a hard border or a border in the Irish Sea, and that perhaps the Leo Varadkar is being far too supportive of the EU position and less of the Irish interests, national interests, in terms of preserving a frictionless border than perhaps he needs to be. And the question is, at what point do you think Leo Varadkar will actually say, hang on a minute, I need to break rank with the EU 27 here, because fundamentally I need to protect the Irish economy and Irish interests?
No, that cannot happen, because Ireland is part of the EU, so it's in the EU's interest, it's in Ireland's interest that there would be a sensible solution. So
what if it's not working? Well, the negotiations aren't working as they're not at the moment in terms of progression. Something needs to be resolved. Leo Varadkar currently, to his credit, has been incredibly loyal in terms of the EU 27 line on the Brexit negotiations. But when it comes to the impact of the economy and the damage to the GDP, if there was to be a change in that border, surely perhaps there'd be pressure from home as well for Leo Varadkar to start actually adopting a more Ireland first approach rather than the EU 27 approach. And I was just wondering whether you see there is any kind of need for perhaps Leo Varadkar to assert the Irish case above the EU 27 case at some point.
Well, no, because in the commitments given prior to Christmas, the United Kingdom said there will be no hard border. That was accepted in good faith by Ireland and the European Union. Now they have an opportunity to come forward with suggestions that are realistic and practical, and until such time as we see those and everybody agrees on them, there's no room for real flexibility or other solutions until then. So I think the ball is now in the United Kingdom court to look at the situation, look at the commitments they gave prior to Christmas, and then transfer them into a legal text that's binding and sensible and practical. And that is really what we want to see happening over the next number of months.
Do you think the UK has its priorities right, or rather is knowledgeable enough about what's going on in terms of the Irish border? Because Leo Varadkar, particularly in terms of comments made by David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, and Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, with regards to the Irish border, he said they need to come and look at it effectively with their own eyes and see the realities of the Irish border. Would you agree there? Do you think that there is a feeling in Ireland that the UK is not being realistic or has not actually gone to the location to see the implications and the reality of the situation and simply negotiating from London?
There's definitely a feeling that some of those who are commentating on it aren't aware of what it is like on the ground, and it would be good for them to come and see it. Last May, when I held a bureau meeting of my group, the EPP, in Ireland, I brought Michel Barnier and MEPs like Emma Brock and others to come and see the border. And it's only when you see it you realise that any change to it could be extremely detrimental. So it would be a good idea, especially for the likes of David Davis and particularly Boris Johnson, to come and look at it before he opens his mouth again regarding the simplicity of having a border the same as you would have in one borough to the other borough in London.
Do you think Boris Johnson's comments up until now with regards to the Irish border have actually undermined and damaged the negotiations over the Irish border, particularly in terms of, what's the feeling is in Ireland towards the UK government?
I'm betwixt and between whether we should actually ignore what Boris Johnson says, because he seems to say different things at different times based on the audience, and I think he seems to like sound bites and being in front of the camera. But at other times he has a responsible job. So speaking as a key member of the United Kingdom government, we have to listen to what he has to say. And I suppose a good solution would be, Boris, come over to Ireland, let us sit down and talk, let's see the border, and we'll buy you a drink at the end of it.
Seán Kelly, thank you very much.